For more than a decade, one of Hollywood's most powerful icons has lived with a silence heavier than any stunt he has ever survived. A silence that stretches between a father and the daughter who grew up without him. It is a truth that has lingered quietly beneath red carpets, headlines, and box office triumphs, an invisible weight that no camera ever fully captured. While the world watched Tom Cruise defy gravity on screen, his youngest child, Suri, was learning how to navigate a life shaped by absence. She was born into a narrative she never volunteered for, photographed before she could speak, and defined by a last name that carried more attention than comfort. Yet, the story that unfolded around her was never about fame. It was about separation, protection, and the silent messages carried by a young girl who was forced to grow up in the shadows of two very different worlds. The beginning looked perfect, almost cinematic. A whirlwind romance between Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes that captivated global audiences with the force of a Hollywood premiere. Their daughter became the emblem of that dream, a child celebrated before she took her first steps. But behind the applauded moments were closed doors, whispered concerns, and forces that shaped decisions far greater than any family dispute. Suri's early years unfolded in controlled spaces, guarded by beliefs, systems, and expectations that a child could never comprehend. She saw her father from a distance, not through conflict, but through an ever-expanding quiet that neither fame nor fortune could bridge. As the years passed, that quiet became the center of everything, defining the rhythm of her life and the choices she would one day make for herself. Now at 19, Suri communicates not through interviews, statements, or media appearances, but through the identity she builds piece by piece. Her decisions are deliberate and striking, echoing through the industry that once placed her at the heart of its most glamorous narrative. She has stepped into adulthood with a firm, steady voice, even if she rarely uses it publicly. The daughter once photographed on the arms of Hollywood royalty now walks her own path, far from the spotlight that once dictated her every movement. And the distance between father and daughter, once a private fracture, has grown into a public question that no one can ignore. But behind the glamour and the excuses, what mechanisms are really driving this crisis? We will analyze every detail, from the initial mistakes to the irreversible damage, to see how the entertainment world works and how an icon is redefined. The truth is layered, complicated, and deeply human. It began with passion, tightened into control, and ultimately erupted into a separation executed with precision and fear. To understand how a family once celebrated as perfect unraveled so completely, we must return to where it all started, to the moment when a fantasy became real, and when two lives collided with a force neither of them could fully control. It began in a way that felt larger than life, as if destiny itself had written the script. When Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes crossed paths in 2005, the reaction was immediate, explosive, and absolute. Hollywood, accustomed to whirlwind romances and fragile fairy tales, still paused to witness this one. Tom Cruise was already a global institution, a man whose films shaped entire eras, whose presence could fill theaters with nothing more than a name on a poster. Katie Holmes arrived from a different world, carrying the soft warmth of her Midwestern upbringing, her Dawson's Creek fame, and a dreamer's sincerity that made her appear untouched by Hollywood's sharper edges. Together, they created a contrast that felt magnetic. One was the unstoppable force of modern cinema, and the other the quiet charm of rising youth. Their connection seemed unreal, too cinematic to belong to an ordinary timeline. The truth behind their beginning was threaded with myth and foreshadowing. Years before they met, Katie had told 17 magazine that she believed she would marry Tom Cruise one day. It sounded innocent, almost playful, a manifestation of youthful admiration. Yet when Tom first encountered her, he reportedly turned to his team and declared, "I am going to marry her." It was not a hope, it was a decision. And when Tom Cruise made a decision, the world usually watched it become real. Their courtship moved with a velocity that felt unnatural. Within weeks, they transitioned from acquaintances to a global phenomenon. Cameras captured them strolling through Rome, laughing as if unaware of the crowds that followed. Tom, normally private and composed, appeared transformed, swept away by an emotion he could not contain or moderate. It was intoxicating to witness, both for them and for the world. The moment that defined their early chapter came on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Tom, in an expression of unrestrained joy, leaped onto the couch and declared his love. The audience gasped, then applauded, unable to fully process the intensity. Viewers around the world debated whether it was passion, impulsivity, or something no one understood. Regardless of interpretation, it became a cultural moment, a symbol of how overwhelming and unusual this romance already was. It also marked the first visible line between Hollywood's expectations and Tom's devotion to a belief system that shaped his worldview. His emotional exuberance was not simply love, it was conviction, fueled by the structure and ideology of Scientology, which had long been central to his identity. When their daughter, Suri, was born on April 18, 2006, Tom described the moment as the happiest day of his life. He repeatedly called her a miracle, a blessing, the center of his world. Yet even this intimate moment unfolded under the doctrines of Scientology. Katie underwent a silent birth, a practice requiring complete quiet in the delivery room, intended to ensure the child entered the world in calmness. Tom purchased a personal sonogram machine, using it at home to monitor the pregnancy in detail. Outsiders struggled to understand these choices, some viewing them as intrusive, others as intense devotion. For Tom, they were expressions of love intertwined with belief. For Katie, raised in Catholic traditions, these rituals marked her first step into a world whose rules she did not fully grasp. Their wedding later that year intensified the divide between public perfection and private tension. Set in the breathtaking 15th-century Odescalchi castle in Bracciano, Italy, the ceremony looked like a royal coronation. With a reported cost of more than $3 million USD, guests arrived from every corner of influential society: Jennifer Lopez, the Beckhams, Will Smith, and an array of global elites. Katie wore Giorgio Armani, her smile radiant yet fragile in hindsight. Tom stood beside her with absolute confidence, energized by celebration and belief. But behind the curated beauty, an uneasy truth lingered. Katie's parents, lifelong Catholics, felt a growing discomfort with the world surrounding their daughter and granddaughter. The secrecy, the hierarchy, and the influence of Scientology shadowed every moment, turning what should have been a family union into a quiet battlefield of faith and control. By 2007, cracks had already formed beneath the gleaming facade. The public still saw the dream, a superstar actor, his luminous wife, and their adored child. The red carpets were dazzling, the magazine covers immaculate, and the photographs seemed to freeze a perfect life in time. Yet inside their private world, subtle shifts were taking hold. Friends noticed that Katie rarely traveled alone. Whether she went to dinner, shopping, or a simple walk, members of Tom's close circle, often individuals strongly connected to Scientology, accompanied her. They were calm, watchful, composed, but always there. Their presence did not feel protective, it felt supervisory. One evening, journalist Maureen Orth sat with them during dinner. Fans occasionally approached, hoping for a glimpse of the couple. Katie smiled politely, but then said something quietly that left Orth unsettled. "Oh, we do not go outside very much." The words were simple, almost casual, but in context they were revealing. They hinted at restriction, at unseen boundaries shaping her daily life. Meanwhile, Tom remained firm, confident, and deeply immersed in his belief system. He championed Scientology publicly, defended it passionately, and saw it as a framework of discipline and purpose. To him, this was life guided by structure. To Katie, the structure was beginning to feel like confinement. The origins of their collapse were not loud arguments or dramatic betrayals. They were soft barriers, accumulating over time, until the air around her felt too heavy to breathe. For Katie, the warning signs did not come from a single moment. They came from the gradual erosion of freedom, the sense of being shaped by hands she could not see, and the growing fear that her daughter might one day be pulled deeper into a system she herself could not fully navigate. It was this slow tightening, this quiet intrusion, that ignited her first steps toward escape. What do you think about this? Comment Amen below so we can continue with the unfinished stories. From the outside, the world still believed in the dream. The photographs of Tom Cruise, Katie Holmes, and their daughter continued to circulate with the polish of a carefully preserved fairy tale. They walked red carpets with effortless composure, their hands intertwined, their smiles bright under the flash of cameras. Magazine spreads portrayed them as a flawless trio, unshaken by pressure, untouched by doubt. Yet the deeper truth was already shifting beneath the surface, as silent and steady as a tide. More than admiration surrounded this family, it was obsession. Media outlets studied their every movement, and the fragile equilibrium inside their home strained under a spotlight that never dimmed. Within that glow, cracks widened quietly. By 2008, friends and casual observers noticed something unsettling in the way Katie moved through public spaces. She was almost never alone. Whether stepping out for a simple errand or arriving at a restaurant, individuals associated with Tom's inner circle or linked directly to Scientology appeared beside her. They were calm, composed, and consistently present, creating an aura of invisible walls around her. Their role was never explicitly defined, yet their presence communicated something unmistakable. They were monitors, shadows moving in rhythm with her steps, shaping her environment with silent authority. To those who understood Scientology's structured hierarchy, the implications were unmistakable. Meanwhile, Tom's public posture remained unwavering. He projected enthusiasm, certainty, and conviction. His dedication to Scientology did not diminish with fame, it amplified. He defended the organization openly, praised its impact on his life, and reinforced his alignment with its teachings. Hollywood embraced him as its tireless blockbuster architect, while Scientology embraced him as its most influential public champion. For Tom, these two worlds did not clash, they merged. But for Katie, the merging felt like entanglement. Her upbringing in Catholic traditions, her close-knit Midwestern roots, and her desire for normalcy clashed with the carefully curated world surrounding her. The media, always hungry for contrast, began to notice the subtle shift in her demeanor. Her once bright and spontaneous presence appeared dimmer, more measured, almost rehearsed. Interviewers heard her repeat the same sentences, the same praise, the same lines about Tom's brilliance and their perfect family. The repetition felt unnatural, as if she were reciting truths she had been instructed to believe rather than ones she genuinely felt. It was not an accusation, it was an observation, amplified by those who knew her before the whirlwind transformed her life. Even in candid moments, such as dinners or quick encounters with fans, her expressions carried a softness tinged with restraint. Then came the comment that lingered in public memory. During a dinner observed by journalist Maureen Orth, Katie smiled at approaching fans, then remarked lightly, "Oh, we do not go outside very much." The statement was brief, almost whispered, but it left Orth frozen. The casual tone could not hide the implication. It spoke of confinement, of routines dictated by external expectations, of a life shrinking quietly inside invisible barriers. It was not the life of an actress at the height of her fame. It was the life of someone navigating a controlled environment. Two opposing narratives formed rapidly in the public sphere. One side believed Tom was protecting his family with intensity, ensuring privacy, and shielding them from invasive media attention. This group interpreted Katie's quieter demeanor as the natural exhaustion of motherhood combined with relentless scrutiny. They admired Tom's dedication and perceived the couple as united against the chaos of celebrity culture. The other side saw signs of restriction. They interpreted the constant presence of Scientology members as supervision rather than support. They noted the diminishing appearances of Katie's family, especially her parents, Martin and Kathleen Holmes, who had always been central figures in her life. They wondered why visits had become infrequent, why her mother's warmth seemed distant in photographs, and why Katie appeared increasingly isolated. Rumors emerged quietly at first, then gathered force. Commentators questioned whether the structures surrounding her were limiting her autonomy, shaping her choices, or influencing the direction of her daughter's upbringing. What seemed protective to one side appeared controlling to the other. Katie felt that shift more intensely than anyone. She began to reclaim small pieces of freedom in discreet ways. She skipped selected church events. She spent extended time in New York, taking Suri to parks, museums, and quiet corners of the city that allowed her to breathe without constant oversight. She reached out to old friends, re-established lines of connection that had faded under the weight of marriage, fame, and ideological tension. Each step was subtle, careful, calculated. She could not move impulsively. She understood the implications of every action. She sensed the boundaries tightening and knew that any miscalculation could create consequences that extended far beyond her own life. Scientology's expectations for children offered no comfort. Tom's adopted children with Nicole Kidman, Bella, and Connor were deeply rooted in the organization, fully committed to its principles and upbringing pathways. For Tom, raising Suri under the same belief system felt natural. For Katie, the idea felt threatening. She did not oppose Tom's personal faith, yet she feared the possibility that her daughter might one day enter a program like the Sea Org, a path she did not understand and could not support. By 2010, the tension inside the household had reached an invisible peak. Public photographs still displayed picture-perfect harmony, but those who saw Katie closely described a woman whose glow had dimmed. Her smiles were thinner, her gestures quieter, her eyes more guarded. She held Suri's hand with increased firmness during public outings, as if grounding herself against the currents she could not control. And all the while, she gathered information, studied legal routes, and calculated possibilities. She did not drift from Tom. She prepared. Carefully, quietly, and with the precision of someone who knew she was being watched. Katie was not planning an exit. She was planning a rescue. The moment everything shifted arrived without warning to the outside world, but it was the culmination of years of quiet preparation. On June 29, 2012, Hollywood froze when news broke that Katie Holmes had filed for divorce from Tom Cruise. The timing was precise, almost surgical. She filed just days before Tom's 50th birthday, in a jurisdiction carefully chosen for its protective custody laws. The world saw a headline. Tom saw a rupture he never imagined possible. In Iceland, where he was filming the science fiction epic Oblivion, he learned about the filing at the same time the public did. For a man who had mastered control in every corner of his professional life, the shock was profound. He later said softly, "It hit me hard. Life can do that to you." His words revealed the depth of his surprise, but the machinery behind Katie's decision had been in motion long before that day. Katie executed her exit with the precision of a covert operation. She changed her phone numbers. She dismissed staff members she feared might be reporting to Scientology handlers. She hired new security, vetted through channels far removed from Tom's world. She consulted quietly with her father, Martin Holmes, a seasoned lawyer with a sharp understanding of contract negotiation and legal risk. Years earlier, he had helped craft the prenuptial agreement. Now, he used that knowledge to design a path towards separation that could withstand scrutiny, pressure, and the influence of one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Katie did not leave in anger. She left to protect her child. Documents filed later in court confirmed the unspoken truth. She feared a future in which Suri would be pulled into the strict, high-how-intense commitment programs within Scientology as she grew older. For Katie, that possibility was unacceptable. The legal storm ended almost as quickly as it began. After only 11 days, the divorce was finalized. Negotiations that might have dragged on for months between other high-profile couples moved with unusual speed. Tom agreed to pay approximately $400,000 per year in child support until Suri reached adulthood, as well as additional expenses related to schooling and health care. But money was never Katie's objective. Her mission was separation. Clean. Absolute. Permanent. The settlement allowed her full control over decisions related to Suri's education, medical treatment, and, most importantly, her spiritual direction. Scientology would not be part of her daughter's future. The morning after the agreement, Katie and Suri vanished from Los Angeles without a trace. When they resurfaced days later in New York City, they walked through Chelsea quietly, without bodyguards, without shadows, and without the weight that had followed them for years. Katie appeared exhausted, but unmistakably free. Tom, meanwhile, entered a different kind of silence. In 2013, during a deposition related to a separate lawsuit, lawyers confronted him with the difficult question that had hovered over the divorce. Had Katie left in part to protect their daughter from Scientology? Tom called the question offensive, yet he conceded that it was one of the assertions involved. His response became the closest he ever came to acknowledging the ideological divide that had fractured their family. Reports at the time stated that he had seen Suri only once after the divorce in a short private meeting. No further confirmed visits or photographs ever emerged. Years passed. Tom immersed himself in his career with renewed intensity. He traveled non-stop for Mission Impossible films, global premieres, world tours, and daring stunts that escalated with every project. He clung to the side of an aircraft mid-flight flight, leaped from helicopters, scaled skyscrapers, and pushed physical boundaries to impossible extremes. Audiences cheered these feats, unaware that another mission, the one involving his daughter, remained untouched. While Tom soared across continents, Suri's life moved in an entirely different direction. Katie relocated permanently to New York, creating a grounded environment focused on routine rather than spectacle. She enrolled her daughter in a private Manhattan school, walked her to dance classes, and took her to local cafes where she blended quietly into the rhythm of the city. For someone born under the blinding glare of celebrity culture, Suri grew up remarkably sheltered from Hollywood's noise. As she entered her teenage years, she developed an identity that resembled her mother's grace and steadiness. Her manner was gentle, her presence calm. Friends described her as thoughtful, warm, and grounded. When conversations drifted toward her father, she simply changed the subject. It was not bitterness, it was detachment. Then came the turning point that revealed her inner transformation. By 2021, Suri attended the prestigious LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts, the famed institution that cultivated generations of artists. She sang, acted, and collaborated on short films with classmates. But it was the school program for the Addams Family musical that startled observers. Her name appeared not as Suri Cruz, but as Suri Noel, adopting her mother's middle name. The decision was small on paper, yet monumental in meaning. It signified independence, a step toward a personal identity separate from her father's globally recognized lineage. When she graduated in June 2024, the name Suri Noel appeared in bold on the official list. Tom was not present. At that moment, he was thousands of miles away, attending a Taylor Swift concert in London. The contrast between father and daughter had never felt sharper. That summer, Suri moved to Pittsburgh to begin her studies in fashion at Carnegie Mellon University. Katie accompanied her quietly, carrying boxes, helping arrange the dorm room, and blending in among other parents. There were no bodyguards, no flashing lights, no special accommodations. It was a simple parent and child moment, made extraordinary only by the history that preceded it. In 2025, while Katie directed a new film titled Happy Hours, Suri visited the set. She was 19, confident and composed, dressed in simple khaki pants, a white tank top, and red sneakers. Most people did not recognize her. She carried herself like someone who had stepped firmly into her own life, no longer shaped by the narratives that once defined her. The most human moment came months later. In October 2025, photographers captured Suri sitting alone on a New York doorstep, her head in her hands, visibly exhausted. Minutes later, Katie arrived in an Uber, sat beside her, and pulled her close. They spoke quietly before walking down the street for pastries. To passers-by, it looked like an ordinary moment between a mother and her daughter. But to those who understood their history, it was the embodiment of a bond forged through escape, resilience, and unwavering protection. The final shape of their journey was not defined by fame or scandal, but by survival. Suri Noel, formerly Suri Cruz, had become her own person. Her father continued his extraordinary cinematic legacy, preparing for a historic collaboration with NASA and SpaceX to film scenes in outer space. Yet the distance between them, stretched across more than a decade of silence, remained unchanged. For all his accomplishments, this was the one mission Tom Cruise had not completed. In the years that followed the fracture of their family, two very different paths continued to unfold. Tom Cruise rose to even greater cinematic heights, his career defined by ambition that defied physical boundaries. He pushed the limits of action filmmaking, performing stunts that blurred the line between reality and spectacle. His name remained synonymous with dedication, precision, and discipline as he pursued projects that spanned continents and eventually reached toward outer space. The world applauded his relentless intensity. His professional triumphs became proof of a man who never stopped reinventing himself. Yet underneath the accolades, one absence remained untouched. The distance between him and his youngest daughter was not measured in miles, but in time, silence, and choices that could not be undone. Suri Noel, meanwhile, stepped into adulthood with a quiet grace shaped by years of living far from Hollywood's gravitational pull. Her life, intentionally crafted by her mother, unfolded through routine rather than spectacle. She studied, created, experimented, and learned to define herself without the weight of her father's legacy. New York became the backdrop for her transformation, a city that allowed her to disappear into its rhythm while still discovering her own. She developed her talent in fashion and the arts, preferring expression over attention, substance over visibility. She built a small yet meaningful world anchored in privacy, friendships, and personal growth. And with each passing year, the identity she forged became clearer. She was no longer the child of a global icon. She was an individual standing steady on her own foundation. Katie Holmes carried her side of the journey with the resolve of someone who understood the magnitude of her decisions. Her focus remained steady, to protect her daughter and give her a life grounded in reality rather than fame. She navigated the aftermath with restraint, allowing her work, her parenting, and her silence to speak for her. Friends described her as grateful, centered, and deeply proud of Suri's independence. She understood that her daughter's strength was not the product of a smooth life, but of one shaped by obstacles survived in quiet resilience. Together they built a bond, defined not by what they escaped, but by what they created afterward. The aftermath of their story reveals a broader truth about the fragile nature of public personas. Fame can amplify victories, but it can also conceal fractures. Power can create opportunities, but it can also blur boundaries. And the narratives that captivate audiences often leave out the complexities that shape the people living them. The story of Tom, Katie, and Suri is not merely a Hollywood drama. It is a reminder that identity is earned, not inherited, and that the most profound journeys happen away from cameras. It is also a reflection of how silence, once it settles between loved ones, can grow into a distance that becomes increasingly difficult to bridge. Today, Tom continues to push the frontiers of film, preparing for unprecedented collaborations that may place him among the stars. Suri continues her education and creative exploration, building a quiet and meaningful life defined entirely by her own choices. Their worlds orbit one another without contact, separated by more than geography. And as both move forward, one question remains suspended in the space between them, unresolved and deeply human. Will she ever let her father back into her life? Or has the distance grown too wide to close?